information on today's topic and more, check out thecheerdoc.com. Ready? 5, 6, 7, 8.
Let's talk about what an ACL injury is, okay? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I'm starting to see and have more people contacting us about knee injuries. There's some big cheer celebrities or cheerleaders recently that have undergone ACL repairs due to injuries sustained while cheering. One very, very popular athlete that has documented her injury, her surgery, and is now documenting her recovery is Kennedy. A lot of you guys follow Kennedy and have been watching her as she goes through her PT and really being very transparent with her recovery, with her surgery. So the other thing, you look back and after Worlds, we mentioned one of the Top Gun athletes that had injured himself during Worlds, during a tumbling pass. And, it was determined, it was talked about through social media that he had an ACL injury. I haven't spoken with the athlete or the coach, so, personally I haven't 100% confirmed that's exactly what happened. But going off of what was indicated through online and social media channels was that he had hurt or torn his ACL. I have seen a couple of ACLs in practice myself through not just cheer, but just in general, have seen some ACL tears lately. And so it's something that's really weighing on me, and I want to talk about it and, make it apparent, bring this information to light so that we can start to prevent these things. So let's talk about what ACL tears actually are. So there are 100,000 ACL tears a year in the United States. Most of our ACL tears are non-contact injuries. So which basically is people aren't hitting you, you're not getting hit in the knee. It's a directional change injury. And so what that means is we're having a direction that we're moving in space. Let's say if we're on a field, so like a soccer player, running, and we cut one way or the other. That would be a non-contact directional change, right? So we're seeing injuries, or these ACL injuries with this non-contact injury. So in cheer, we apply that to what we do. So think about a tumbling pass, right? So we're running, we're tumbling, and then let's say we're doing fulls or we're twisting. We land with our feet, but our body continues to rotate through that tumbling pass or through that skill. That is, again, a non-impact directional change injury. So what your ACL actually does, let's talk about what ACL stands for. ACL stands for anterior cruciate ligament. So all that means is anterior is to the front because you have an anterior or an ACL, and you have a PCL, posterior, to the back. So these ligaments cross inside your knee joint like this, okay, at an angle. And what the ACL does is it prevents your shin bone down here from sliding forward like this, so sliding forward with relation to your thigh bone or your femur. The other thing it prevents is rotation, like this. So if you think about, for our listeners, medial rotation. So you're twisting your shin bone inward. And so when you think about what the ACL does and how a full, like a running, tumbling full, how that can impact the ACL, it makes perfect sense that we would have some sort of issue there if we don't have stability in the knee. Because as we land, we're continuing to rotate, and if the feet plant the ground and then we still have some twisting, boom, there can go our ACL. And so when we look at ACL injuries, we have to say, okay, if we've got 100,000 of these things and we're starting to see, I'm not going to say an increase, but maybe we're starting to see them more often because of how social media is and a lot of people are documenting their injuries. But when we look at these ACL injuries, we have to think, okay, how can we prevent this, right? Because once it happens, it's something that you either have one of two roads. You can have it repaired and rehab, or just rehab and go without one. Now, that's not an ideal circumstance for a high intensity athlete to be without an ACL, but for your typical population, that's actually becoming more of a common option. But when you have an ACL injury, let's talk about what an ACL injury feels like. because that's one common thing people, they may land and they may say, I hurt my knee. I hope it wasn't my ACL. So let's talk about your typical signs of an ACL injury. Number one, a pop. That's very, very common. That's generally well documented across the board, is if you have a pop in your knee, that is typically leaning towards an ACL. Additionally, swelling. So if your knee swells and it becomes puffy around the joint, that's, again, another indicator of an ACL. And those two together, pop and swelling, almost universally accepted that is an ACL injury. Now, the weird thing is pain, right? People that have ACL tears typically will indicate that they felt pain immediately and it was very fast. But then, very short period of time, not like less than a day, pain drops off pretty dramatically. And you're left with a feeling of instability, feeling like your knee's going to give out. So initially, pop, pain, and swelling, and then after a day or so, maybe a touch of some swelling left, feeling of instability, and not really much pain, okay? So that's our typical. Now, obviously, if you feel like you've had an ACL injury, the best thing to do is to go see a doctor, right? Have somebody examine your knee, not if you end up in a walk-in clinic, that's very unlikely that they're going to know how to fully examine your ACL. I have nothing against family doctors, primary care doctors. Love them to death, work with a bunch of them on a regular basis, but they also typically are not very well versed in orthopedic evaluations of the extremities. Some are, a lot of them aren't. So they're going to end up sending you to, more than likely, an ortho who's going to look to get an MRI, likely, or they may send you to a physical therapist or a sports-centered chiro. So you want to find, I would say, if you can get directly to a sports chiropractor or a physical therapist first, that's going to be your ideal. They're going to be the ones that are going to be able to test that knee effectively without needing an image quite yet. If they suspect that you may have an ACL tear, they'll likely send you for an MRI, and then your MRI will be read by a radiologist, and it'll determine if you've actually had the tear. And then if you've had a tear and it is a full tear, which we have 3 grades of injury to the ACL, a grade 1, a grade 2, and a grade 3. Grade 1, minimal sprain, probably won't see anything on image, may have some discomfort. Second, you stretch the ligament out. A lot of people consider this what's called a partial tear to the ACL. And then lastly is your grade 3, where you have a full rupture of the ACL. So when we have an ACL injury, again, on a whole different topic, you can either do surgery or you can avoid surgery for people who are less active. So there are 2 other structures that help with the ACL with regards to the movement that it prevents, or its job. So we talked about its job is to keep your shin bone and your thigh bone from sliding against each other too much or twisting. And so the other 2 structures that help with that are, number 1, your meniscus, and number 2 are your hamstrings. So your meniscus is a structure in your knee that is in between the bones. It's like the end of a chicken bone. If you've ever seen that white kind of clear thing at the end of a chicken bone, that's kind of like what your meniscus is on your knee. It protects the bones from rubbing against each other. But it also helps the ACL to prevent your bones from sliding on each other. And then the other is your hamstrings. And this is where we can get into how do we prevent these types of injuries. So one thing that we've talked about numerous times, and I will continue to harp on it until it becomes a more common thing, is that cheerleaders are notoriously weak in their hamstrings. Notoriously weak in hamstrings. We have strong thighs from stunting and tumbling and jumps, and we have flexible and weak hamstrings and glutes across the board. And when I think back to my cheer career and I think back to conditioning and all the things that we did, there was rarely ever a time when I saw, when we did posterior chain or low back glutes hamstring strengthening. It was very rare, if ever. And the reason is because we put so much emphasis on flexibility of the hamstrings. And that combination of over-dominant thigh muscles, weak and over-flexible hamstrings is a perfect melting pot, perfect storm for ACL tears. Now we add in the fact that girls have a higher chance of ACL tears, especially during your menstrual cycle. So during that time frame, you have an increased risk of ACL tears due to changes in your blood chemistry. So we have this sport that we're basically predisposing our athletes to ACL injuries. So we can stop it. We can dramatically cut down how often we have an ACL injury. And the way that we do that is we make a shift from our focus of hamstring flexibility only and quad strength only, and we blend them. We have to bring up hamstring and glute strength to strengthen the muscles in the back of the leg to balance the quad muscles so that there's not this over-dominant thigh muscle that's yanking the leg or shearing the joint, so to say, or sliding those bones against each other. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to take the conditioning that you're already doing, don't add a bunch of stuff and make your conditioning routines longer. Don't add extra sessions if you're already in a competitive level and there's a ton of conditioning that you're already doing. All we have to do is take half of the time that we're conditioning and take it away from things like jumping and squatting and lunging and all the things that we're already doing and put it into things like glute bridges, doing things like hamstring strengthening where we do Nordic negatives that we have a video of on our YouTube and our Instagram. It's one of the most effective hamstring strengthening exercises out there. That's just using body weight. We can lay on our backs, put our heels on the tumble track, and we can lift our butt off the ground doing hamstring curls with our heels on the tumble track. We can work on glute strength by doing the banded walks where we put the band around our knees, we squat down, and we walk side to side, which we have videos of. So there's little bitty things that we can do to prevent this injury. And the thing about ACLs and why, I want to really address this is because an ACL tear and surgery is not like a muscle strain, right? This is not an overuse injury that you're going to ice and stretch and things go away. ACL injuries are a serious injury. And when you have surgery to repair these, it is a major surgery. I scrubbed in on an ACL surgery last week. I watched the procedure and watched them cut the knee, and they, it's human carpentry, right? I mean, there were drills, and they were getting in there, they were cleaning things out and sucking things out, and screwing and bolting things. I mean, it is a very serious surgery. It's not something to be taken lightly, and the recovery, is a lot better now than it used to be. Most athletes are back from ACL injuries within a few months, and within a year, you're pretty much back to full activity. But it's still a very serious procedure. It's nothing to scoff at. And the thing about ACL injuries is nobody's expecting them, right? You don't ever expect to have an ACL tear. It just happens. It's that fast. So if we're not prepared for it and it has a long recovery, why don't we just prepare for it so we don't have to worry about the recovery process? So if you scroll through our YouTube and our Instagram, there are videos and things about conditioning and strengthening for glutes, hamstrings. And you'll notice on the Workout Wednesdays, we do a lot of deadlifts, our RDLs, our straight leg deadlift. You see that a lot. And there's a reason I put that in there. And it's to help to balance strength-wise a lot of the imbalances that we have in our sport. And so the ACL, it's such an unfortunate injury when it happens. Instead of waiting for it to happen and trying to scramble, let's just prevent them. Let's just do everything we can to prevent them from ever happening. So we did have a question. Can you still cheer after an ACL injury? Is it recoverable? That was from Giovanna. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can absolutely come back from an ACL injury. and you can cheer again. I've known athletes that have cheered with an ACL tear that decided not to go through the surgery. They just wear a very specific knee brace, and it helps to create extra stability. The ACL it's not really a completely necessary structure in your knee. Think about your ACL, and I got this from a buddy of mine. I think it's a great analogy. Think about your ACL as a seatbelt, right? You drive around, you drive normal, you drive the speed limit, you don't take hard turns, you don't do fast starts and stops, and you don't need a seatbelt to keep you in the seat. Now, obviously, don't not wear a seatbelt because that's against the law. But just as your body's sitting in the seat, if you're not wearing a seatbelt and you don't drive crazy, you're not going to be flipped all over the car. Now, you start taking hard corners and you start, stop, then yeah, you're going to get thrown all over the seat, and the seatbelt will hold you in place. So think about your ACL as a very similar structure. So you may not need it necessarily, but if you're going to be a high impact athlete like a cheer athlete is, typically when you have a tear, it's in the best interest to have it repaired and then to go through the rehab, which is as important, if not more important, than actually fixing the knee, right? So the most important thing you can do after you do have an ACL surgery is do exactly what your physical therapist and your surgeon tell you to do. It's the most important thing. I cannot stress that enough. You cannot skip the rehab, because if you do, you're going to set yourself up again for hurting it. And once you've done it once, if you do it again, the more times you do it, the less likely that the surgery is going to be going to take well, and the more likely that you'll injure it more in the future, because you build a lot of scar tissue from repetitively injuring it. So great question. So that I just want to touch base on these ACLs. It's the beginning of the year. I'm seeing some of them already, and it's unfortunate that we're having these injuries. But the good thing is these are things that can be prevented. Not fully, but we can take a lot of steps to keep our knees safe so that we're not out for the rest of the year when they happen. So if you guys have any questions about ACLs or any other injuries, shoot me a private message, leave a comment below, and we'll make sure to answer those. For those that are joining us on video, I just want to show you guys I have been working feverishly doing research on some upcoming fun stuff with some supplements that we are creating specifically for cheerleaders. I'm super excited to get you guys introduced to a few things. We're going to be looking at some joint health supplements to help with things like your ligaments and your joints, because we obviously have a lot of those in our sport, or joint injuries, I should say. So we're going to try to give you guys some things to help supplement your joints and ligaments to keep them very, very healthy. We're looking at things like stress relief type hormones, especially when we get to competition season. Anxiety goes up a bit. We're going to be looking at finding some natural ways to give you guys some things to help bring anxiety levels down, keep your mental focus right where it should be, and not stressed out, as well as some other things like muscle recovery, proteins, things like that, just to help you guys get the nutrients that you need to be the best athlete that you can. So hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Thanks for joining again this week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us. Be sure to check out thecheerdoc.com for more content. Also, if you found the material today valuable, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for listening, and have an incredible day.